The starfield outside the main viewport was perfect and unchanging. Inside the bridge of the generational ship Zhong, the only sound was the low hum of machinery that had run for centuries. Hanul Park watched the data scroll on his screen. His fingers moved slowly, checking numbers he had checked 100 times before. "Final approach vector is confirmed," he said, his voice quiet in the large room, the captain's chair. Daehyun Kim did not look away from the viewport. He was an old man, his hair completely white. His family had commanded the Zhong for 10 generations. He had spent his whole life studying the maps and history files of a world he had never seen. "Bring us to the edge of the system, Hanul." "Slow and careful," Daehyun said. The Zhong was not a fast ship. It was a giant metal island, built to carry 20,000 people away from a dying Earth 900 years ago. Its engines pushed it forward one last time. The crew, descendants of the original Korean evacuation fleet, moved with a quiet tension. Today was the day. After 30 generations born in metal halls, they would see sunlight that did not come from a lamp. They would feel real wind. Myri Song stood next to Hanul, her eyes sharp. She was a biologist. Her entire purpose was to study the soils and life of the new world. Her tools were ready. "I am picking up some strange background radiation," she noted. "It does not match the old charts." 900 years is a long time," Hanul replied. "The star's output could have shifted." The ship moved past where Pluto should have been. There was nothing. No signal, no beacon. The space was empty. "Continue," Daehyun said, his voice tighter. They passed where Neptune and Uranus should have painted their orbits. Nothing but empty space and cold rocks. A heavier silence fell on the bridge. The hum of the ship felt louder. "Captain," Hanul said, his pragmatic tone beginning to crack. "The mass sensors detect no large bodies in the inner system. I am checking the instruments." "Check them again," Daehyun ordered. The Zhong moved inward. Where the gas giant Jupiter should have filled their sensors with its mighty pull, there was a scattering of asteroids, a graveyard of broken stone and ice. Hanul's screens flashed with alerts. Myri stopped looking at her own data and stared at the main viewport, her hand rising to her mouth. They finally reached the orbit where a beautiful blue-green planet should have been waiting, the place where Earth lived. There was only a void, a deep, empty blackness dotted with distant, uncaring stars. Where their home should have been, there was nothing. No Mars, no Venus, just a terrible, complete absence. For a long minute, no one spoke. The entire purpose of their journey, the reason for their existence, had just vanished. The hope of 30 generations evaporated into the cold air of the bridge. Daehyun Kim slowly stood up from his chair. He walked to the viewport and placed his hand against the cold, transparent material. He looked into the emptiness where his family's stories, his history, his very identity was supposed to be. A single tear traced a line down his weathered cheek, but his face was stone. "Broadcast on all old frequencies," he whispered, then cleared his throat and spoke louder. "Broadcast the homecoming message." A young communications officer, his face pale, sent the signal. It was a recording made 900 years ago by the first captain. A message of hope, ending with, "We are coming home." The signal raced out into the nothingness. They waited. Minutes passed. Only static hissed back at them, the sound of cosmic emptiness. Hanul worked furiously, his mind clinging to logic. The residual energy, it's all wrong. This space shows signs of massive dimensional shear. It's not that something exploded. It's like something was cut away. Myri looked at the debris data. Some of these metal signatures, they are alloy compositions from the evacuation era. This is human-made wreckage. But it's cold. Nora diascendica. It's as if time stopped for it. Before Daehyun could respond, a new light appeared on the edge of the viewport. It was not a natural light. It was a crisp, purple-white tear in space that opened without a sound. From it, a ship glided out. It was nothing like the blocky, practical Zhong. It was sleek, seamless, and looked like it was grown rather than built. It moved to a position facing them. A communication request appeared on their screen. using a protocol so advanced it translated itself. Daehyun nodded. Put it on screen. The face that appeared was not human. It had large, dark eyes and smooth, gray skin. It wore no expression they could read. I am Counselor Tal of the Galactic Concord, it said, its voice perfectly translated but without any warmth. You are the source of the primitive radio signal? I am Captain Daehyun Kim of the Generation Ship Jong. From Earth, Daehyun said, standing straight. We have returned to our home system. We cannot locate it. The alien Tal blinked slowly. That is correct. You cannot. The stellar body known as Earth, and its entire planetary system, vanished from this locus 912 standard years ago. The event is recorded in our archives. The species Homo sapiens was classified as lost. Your appearance is unexpected. The words landed like physical blows. Vanished. Lost. What happened? Myri asked, stepping forward, her scientific mind cutting through the shock. The cause remains unknown, Tal said. It is a foundational mystery of our modern astronomy, a warning against unstable spatial practices. The aliens seem to study them. Your vessel is a relic. Your technology is pre-Concord. You are now a displaced people. The Galactic Concord can offer you settlement on a designated reserve world. It is a kindness. Daehyun's eyes burned. He looked from the alien's face to the terrible void behind it. No, he said, his voice rough but firm. We will wait here. There is nothing to wait for, Captain, Tal said. You said the cause is unknown? Hanul interrupted, pointing to his science screen. But something happened here. The physics are torn. We will stay and study. Counselor Tal gave a slight, indifferent tilt of its head. As you wish. Your sentiment is illogical, but it is your choice. Do not interfere with Concord space. You are now in our history. The transmission ended. The alien ship hung in the distance, a silent watcher. The crew of the Jong looked out at the empty place where their world had been. The joy of homecoming was gone, replaced by a hollow, chilling grief. They were not settlers returning. They were archaeologists at their own grave. And Hanul could not look away from the strange, fading energy signature on his screen. The only clue in a universe that had erased their home. The silence on the bridge was different now. Before, it had been the quiet of waiting. Now it was the heavy quiet of a funeral. The alien ship, Counselor Tal's vessel, had left. It had slipped back into that purple-white tier and vanished, leaving them alone with the void. Captain Daehyun Kim did not move from the viewport. He stared into the empty space where Earth's blue light should have been. His shoulders were stiff. Sir, Hanul Park said finally, the Concord ship is gone. They left a listening satellite near the asteroid belt. It is watching us. Daehyun nodded slowly. Let them watch. He turned, his eyes finding his crew. They looked lost. We are not going to their reserve world. We are not a museum piece. We came home. This, he said, pointing at the viewport, is home, even if it is empty. Myri Song spoke up. The data from the debris field is strange. Hanul is right. The metal compositions are from our time, but the atomic decay is paused. It defies physics. Then that is where we start, Daehyun said. We take the shuttles. We go out there. We look for answers in the pieces that are left. The idea gave the crew a purpose. Instead of floating in despair, they could move. They could touch something. The shuttle bay, a vast cavern at the Jong's belly, was busy. Hanul and Myri prepared a small survey craft. Hanul loaded sensor gear. Myri packed containment boxes for samples. Her face was focused. Science was a language she understood, even when the universe did not make sense. Do you think we will find anything? She asked Hanul as they checked their suits. I think the Concord missed something, he said. They saw a mystery and called it solved. They are too advanced to care about scraps. But scraps are all we have. The shuttle detached from the Jong with a soft thump. It flew into the field of wreckage. Up close, it was more haunting. It was not the wreckage of a battle. There were no blast marks. The pieces looked clean, as if sliced by a giant, precise knife. A piece of a hull panel floated past, the faded letters Earth Orbital Dock still visible. Hanul guided the shuttle's robotic arm. It grasped a fragment of twisted alloy. He pulled it into the sample airlock. "Bringing it inside," he said. Inside the shuttle, Myri opened the inner hatch. The piece of metal floated in the zero gravity. It was cold. She scanned it with a handheld device. Her brow furrowed. "This is impossible," she whispered. "The atomic structure is locked. No decay heat. No radiation signature. It is not just old. It is outside of time." Hanul looked at the data on his screen. "The energy signature I detected is all through this area. It's a pattern. It's not natural background noise. It's like a scar. They spent hours collecting fragments. A broken data core, its ports familiar. A piece of ceramic from a coffee cup, the pattern still clear. Each piece was cold and silent, a frozen moment from 900 years ago." Back on the Zhong, Daehyun was in the archive room. The walls were covered with old screens showing images of Earth. Forests, mountains. The city of Seoul at night. A river of light. He was holding a physical book, its pages brittle. It was a history of the Korean resistance during the final evacuation. He was not reading it. He was just holding it. Hanul and Myri found him there. They showed him the scans of the metal fragment. "Time did not pass for it," Myri explained. "It was removed from the normal flow. This is not destruction. This is something else." Daehyun placed the book carefully on a table. "Can you find the source of the scar? The center point?" "I think so," Hanul said. "The energy pattern gets stronger towards the exact orbital center. The point where Earth should be. Then that is where we look next," Daehyun said. The next day, they took the shuttle to the very center of the emptiness. It felt wrong, flying through space where an entire world should have been. Their instruments beeped softly. "There," Hanul said, pointing. "Readings are spiking. But there is nothing to see." It was true. The viewport showed only stars. But the sensors screamed. Space itself was wounded here. Myri had an idea. What if we don't look for matter? What if we look for information? A data core in that field had a power source. It is dead. But what if the event imprinted something? Like a shadow on a wall after a flash of light. Hanul thought about it. He recalibrated the shuttle's main sensor array. He told it to stop looking for solid objects. He told it to look for quantum echoes, for information ghosts in the fabric of space. The scanner hummed. Lines of data flowed. First it was just noise. Then a pattern emerged. It was faint, like a whisper. "It's fragmented," Hanul said, his voice full of wonder. "It's not a signal. It's leftover data, trapped in the scar." On a screen, words in Old Korean script flickered, broken and incomplete. "Final protocol. Fold the manifold. Not enough time. Save the..." Then it was gone. They had found a message in the wound. A message from the end. Daehyun listened to the recording of the broken words over and over. His grief was changing. It was no longer just sadness. It was becoming a need to know. What was the final protocol? What did fold the manifold mean? He looked from the viewport of the shuttle back to the large, lonely shape of the Zhong. The alien Concord thought they were sentimental fools clinging to rocks. But the rocks were speaking. They just had to learn how to listen. "We stay," Daehyun said again, this time with more strength. "We listen to the silence until it tells us its secret." Hanul and Myri nodded. The empty space no longer felt just like a grave. It felt like a room where someone had spoken a moment before. The air still vibrated with the words. They just had to find the right ear to hear it. Days turned into weeks. The Zhong hung in the silent dark, a lonely sentinel. The crew worked in shifts, scanning the emptiness, listening to the quantum ghost whispers trapped in space. The mood was a mix of sorrow and stubborn purpose. They were listening to a door that had been closed for 9 centuries. Hanul Park rarely left his console. He had mapped the scar, the strange energy field. It was a perfect sphere, centered exactly where Earth's core should have been. It was not active. It was dormant, like a sleeping machine. Myri Song spent her time with the physical fragments. In a clean lab, she examined the piece of the coffee cup. Under her microscope, the glaze was not weathered. It was as fresh as the day it was made, yet her instruments told her it was ancient. It was a puzzle that broke the rules. Captain Daehyun Kim visited the shuttle bay every morning. He would look at the small survey craft, then out at the stars. He was waiting, but he did not know for what. The change happened without warning. One moment, the bridge was quiet. The next, every alarm sounded at once. A deep, subsonic hum vibrated through the ship's hull, felt in the bones more than heard. "Report!" Daehyun shouted. Rushing to his chair, Hanul's hands flew over his screen. Massive energy buildup at the scar's center. Off the scale. It's not an explosion. It's a tear. In the main viewport, the starfield rippled. Space itself seemed to fold, like a piece of paper being bent. There was no light, no sound in the vacuum. But they could see it happen. A crack, a silent rip in reality, opening at the heart of the emptiness. From the tear, light spilled. It was a soft, white gold light. And then shape began to form. It was vast, blotting out the stars behind it. It was Earth. But it was not their Earth. It grew from the tear, solid and sudden, until it filled their view. The planet was there again after 900 years. Yet everything was wrong. The familiar blues and greens and browns were gone. The continents were smooth, geometric shapes, circles, hexagons, perfect lines. The oceans were a uniform, brilliant cerulean blue, without waves or currents visible from space. Clouds did not drift in natural patterns. They formed in precise, repeating spirals above certain points. The entire surface was covered in structures. They were not cities as humans built them. They were vast, crystalline formations and towers of seamless white material, arranged in grids that stretched for thousands of miles. There were no lights suggesting movement, no signs of heat from industry or life. It was utterly still. A perfect, silent, geometric jewel hanging in space. On the bridge, no one spoke. They could only stare. The return of their home was more shocking than its disappearance. "Life signs?" Daehyun finally asked, his voice a dry whisper. "None," Hanul said, stunned. "No radio emissions. No thermal signatures beyond basic solar absorption. The surface temperature is a uniform 22 degrees Celsius everywhere. That's impossible." Myri looked at the biological scanners. Atmosphere is reading as ideal, nitrogen-oxygen mix, but no organic particles, no microbial life in the air. The sterile. It's like a simulation of a planet. Before they could process more, space around the new Earth shimmered. Dozens of those purple-white tears opened. Ships of the Galactic Concord emerged, hundreds of them. They were not sleek scout ships like Tal's. These were warships. Massive vessels with smooth, weapon-studded hulls formed a vast cordon around the planet. The Jong was a small, rusty pebble beside them. A communication request flashed. Urgent. It was Counselor Tal. Daehyun nodded to accept. Tal's face appeared. The alien's usual calm was gone. Its large eyes were wide, its body tense. "Captain Kim, you will power down your vessel's engines and weapon systems immediately. You will not attempt to approach the anomalous object." "It is not an object," Daehyun said, finding his voice. "It is Earth. Our home. That is not a home." "It is an ontological breach," Tal said, its translated voice sharp. "Its reappearance violates fundamental laws. The energy signatures are beyond Concord understanding. You will stand by. Do not provoke a response from it." "Provoke?" Myri asked. "It's just there. It's not doing anything." "That is the concern," Tal said. "Its passive state is an unknown. This potential is incalculable. The Concord Defense Fleet is here to contain the situation. You will comply." The transmission ended abruptly. The Jong was now trapped between a wall of alien warships and a planet that looked like a god's toy. Hanul looked from the terrifyingly perfect Earth to the intimidating fleet. They are afraid, truly afraid. They don't understand what it is, so they want to cage it. Daehyun kept his eyes on the planet. The geometric shapes where Korea should have been were a painful mystery. They want us to just look from a distance. After 900 years of journey, he shook his head slowly. No. What are you going to do? Myri asked, her own scientific desire to go down there warring with the sight of the warships. Daehyun sat back in his chair, a new resolve hardening his old face. He looked at the image of the planet, then at the faces of his crew. We did not come this far to be told we are not allowed to go home. We are going down there. It is a direct violation of their order, Hanul said. Their order is based on fear, Daehyun replied. Our reason is based on right. Prepare the landing shuttle. Take a small team. Find a way. Find a place where their blockade is thin. We are going to the surface. He looked back at the silent, waiting world. It was not the warm, living planet of his stories, but it was there. And for the first time since they arrived at the empty void, the hollow grief inside him was replaced by a fierce, burning need. He had to walk on that ground, no matter what it had become. The shuttle bay was a pocket of quiet tension. Outside, the immense Concorde blockade hung like a net of cold stars. Captain Daehyun stood before Hanul, Myri, and two other crew members, June and Sumin. They were all dressed in simple exploration suits, not armor. We are not soldiers, Daehyun said, his voice low. We are visitors. Remember that. Our only weapon is our story. Our only right is that we belong to this place, no matter how it looks now. Hanul had found a gap. The Concorde fleet was dense around the planet's equatorial zone, but their coverage near the former Arctic Circle was thinner. It was a risk. The shuttle, callsign Morning Return, was small and its engines were not designed for stealth. But it was their only chance. We go quiet. No active scans. No signals, Hanul said, his hands on the pilot's controls. Myri sat beside him, her eyes fixed on the navigational overlay that showed the wall of alien ships. The bay doors opened to the silent spectacle. The geometrically perfect Earth dominated the view, half in shadow. The Concorde ships, angular and menacing, patrolled in perfect formation. The Jong looked like a forgotten old crate beside them. Launching now, Hanul whispered. The Morning Return slipped out of the bay. He did not fire the main thrusters. Instead, he used tiny directional jets, letting momentum carry them on a slow, curving path away from the Jong and the fleet's main focus. They were a speck of dust moving against a dark painting. Minutes felt like hours. A large Concorde cruiser passed within 50 kilometers. Its sensors swept over them. Hanul held his breath. But their small, cold, simple craft seemed to be ignored, perhaps classified as debris. The cruiser moved on, entering upper atmosphere in 30 seconds, Myri reported. Her knuckles were white. They hit the atmosphere. There was no violent shake, no heating of the hull. The air was smooth, offering no resistance. It was as if the planet was accepting them without comment. They broke through a layer of perfectly spiral clouds and saw the surface below. It was breathtaking and deeply unsettling. Where there should have been the ragged coastline of the Korean peninsula, there was a smooth, raised plateau of white material. It was like a giant, polished stone table. Across it, in orderly lines, stood crystalline towers that caught the sunlight and broke it into rainbows. There were no roads, no rivers, no fields. Hanul brought the shuttle down in a flat, open area between two lines of towers. The landing gear touched the surface without a sound. The world outside the viewport was utterly still. The air was clear. A gentle, artificial feeling breeze blew. They stood at the hatch, helmets sealed. Daehyun took a deep breath. Open it. The hatch slid open. The air that washed in was fresh and smelled of nothing. No earth, no plants, no life. Just clean, empty air. Daehyun was the first to step down. His boot touched the white ground. It was not rock or soil. It was smooth and slightly warm. He took a few steps away from the shuttle. He looked up at the impossible towers, at the cerulean sky with its patterned clouds. He was standing on the coordinates of his ancestral home, and it was an alien art project. Myri stepped out next, her scanner already in her hand. The composition is unknown. Complex carbon ceramic lattice. It's self-repairing on a molecular level. This whole plateau is one single object. Hanul joined them, his eyes wide behind his visor. No electromagnetic activity, but there is a hum. Very low frequency. In the ground. They began to walk towards the nearest crystalline tower. As they moved, something changed. The white ground beneath their feet began to glow softly along a straight path, leading directly to the tower's base. It was not a bright light. It was a gentle guide. "It knows we're here," June said, his voice tight. "It's not hostile," Myri observed. "It's analytical. It is lighting a path for the foreign objects for us to follow, to see where we go." They followed the lit path. It led them to a wide, arching entrance at the base of the tower. Inside, the space was vast and empty. The walls were the same white material, emitting a soft, sourceless light. In the very center of the floor, a single, dark pedestal rose. On the pedestal was not a machine or a screen. It was a simple, flat disc of a silvery metal. It looked old, out of place in this perfection. Daehyun approached it. He saw markings on the disc. They were not geometric. They were letters, Korean letters etched by a human hand. He read them aloud, his voice cracking. "For the children who return, look not with eyes." He reached out, his gloved hand hovering over the disc. "What does it mean?" Hanul was scanning the room. "The walls, they're reacting. They're not storing data electronically. The information is in the atomic structure of the room itself. It's a quantum archive. The disk is a key, a focal point. How do we use it?" Myri asked. Daehyun slowly, carefully, placed his bare hand on the cold metal of the disk. Nothing happened for a second. Then the disk grew warm. The light in the room shifted. The walls seemed to dissolve into streams of light and images. It was not a screen. It was as if the air itself became a display. Words, pictures, sounds, and sensations flooded into their minds. It was not an invasion. It was an offering, a library opening its doors. They saw Earth as it was, crowded, chaotic, beautiful, dying. They felt the panic of its final days. They saw the global project, not a weapon but a desperate act of salvation. They saw scientists from every nation, working in shattered cities. They heard the warnings of a coming wave of radiation from a dying star, a wave that would sterilize the galaxy. There was no time to leave. No ship could outrun it. And then they understood the words from the quantum scar. Fold the manifold. The archive showed the solution. They could not move the planet, so they moved reality around it. They folded space and time itself, tucking Earth and its solar system into a hidden layer of existence, a pocket universe. Their time flowed differently. They could wait out the deadly wave. But to do it, to sustain the fold for the centuries needed, required a unity of consciousness impossible for individual human minds. The cost of survival was their individual bodies. The people of Earth chose to merge, mind with mind, consciousness with the planetary systems themselves, becoming a single gestalt intelligence to pilot the planet through its impossible journey. The last image was not of an ending, but a transformation. Billions of points of light, each a human soul, flowing together like rivers into a single, calm ocean. The ocean was the planet. The planet was alive. It was them. The light faded. The room was simple and white again. The disk was just a disk. The four humans stood in silence, tears streaming down their faces inside their helmets. They were not looking at an alien world. They were standing inside the mind of their ancestors. Earth had not died. It had transcended. It had saved itself in the only way it could. Daehyun removed his helmet, the sterile air touching his wet face. He looked at the others, his heart breaking with a terrible, beautiful understanding. "They're not gone," he whispered. "They're here. All of them. They're the ground we're standing on." The silence in the white room was different now. It was no longer the silence of an empty place. It was a listening silence. The weight of what they had learned pressed on them. The air itself felt heavy with memory. Hanul was the first to move. He placed his hand on the cool wall. "It's not a building," he said, his voice full of awe. "It's a thought, made solid." Myri looked at her scanner, then shut it off. Its readings were meaningless here. They unified a complete planetary consciousness. To save the biological record, they had to stop being biological. She looked at Daehyun. They did it to survive. Daehyun nodded slowly, still holding the silvery disc. He felt a connection to it like holding an old family photo. They waited out the storm for 900 of our years, and then they came back. He looked around. But why like this? Why this perfection? As if in answer, the light in the room shifted again. This time, no images flooded their minds. Instead, a feeling settled over them. It was calm, clear, and vast. It was not a voice. It was an understanding that appeared in their thoughts, like remembering something they had always known. Welcome. The single word held no sound, but it carried warmth. It felt like a sunbeam in the mind. Daehyun spoke aloud, his voice shaky. "We are the descendants of the evacuation. From the ship Jong. We came home." The feeling in the air changed, rippling with a profound, gentle recognition. It was like a parent seeing a child grown old. "You endured. You journeyed. You are of us." Then, a new wave of understanding came. It showed them the view from the outside. The galactic concord with its stable, careful civilizations that had never faced true extinction. They were advanced, but they were also stagnant. They managed, they curated, but they did not transcend. They feared the new and the unknown. The Gestalt consciousness of Earth, the unified voice of humanity, understood the Concord's fear. This new Earth was a power they could not control, a mystery they could not solve. The geometric perfection was not for show. It was efficiency. It was the form of a mind that had shed the chaos of individual bodies and focused on pure, sustained existence. Then, the offer came. It was not spoken. It was presented as a simple, logical conclusion. A beautiful picture formed in their thoughts. They could join Hanul, Myri, Daehyun, June, Sumin, all their people on the Jong. They could leave their fragile, aging bodies behind. Their individual minds could be gently integrated into the planetary whole. They would not die. They would become part of something eternal. They would know the thoughts of their ancestors directly. They would never be alone, never be afraid, never die. It was the next step, the natural conclusion of coming home. For a moment, it was incredibly tempting. The peace in the offer was immense. It felt like laying down a heavy burden after a very long walk. Myri gasped. The scientific part of her mind was thrilled and horrified.
Upolat asimilitan.
It's the ultimate preservation. But alongside the offer came another understanding, a darker one. The Gestalt knew the Concord fleet above was not just watching. It was preparing. The unknown power of Earth was an existential threat to their orderly galaxy. The Concord would not allow it to exist freely. They would try to control it, to break it apart to see how it worked, or destroy it if they could not. The Gestalt could protect itself, but conflict was inefficient. It was a relic of their old, biological chaos. The choice was presented, clear and calm. Remain as you are, finite, separate, endangered, or become part of the enduring whole. Infinite, safe, united. Daehyun looked at his hands. They were old, lined with veins. He felt the ache in his knees from the long walk. He thought of the book in his cabin, the recording of a child's laugh from Seoul. That laugh was individual. It was a single moment of joy from a single person, now gone. In the perfect unity of the Gestalt, would that laugh still matter? Or would it be lost in the beautiful, quiet noise of the whole? He thought of the voyage, the fights, the love stories, the births and deaths in the metal halls of the Jong. The struggle was their story. Was that just chaos to be cleaned up? "We would lose ourselves," he said, not to the room, but to Hanul and Myri. Hanul's face was tight with conflict. "We would gain everything. Knowledge, peace, survival. Isn't that why our ancestors did it?" "Yes," Daehyun said. To survive, they had no other choice. The radiation wave was coming. But we have a choice. He turned, as if facing the consciousness in the walls. You saved all that we were. But if we join you, who saves what we are? The listening silence deepened. The Gestalt was considering his words. It had not thought in terms of individual what we are for centuries. It thought in terms of we. Before the silent conversation could continue, Sumin, who had been monitoring their comms, cried out, "Captain!" A signal from the Zhong, tight beam, scrambled. A voice, filled with static and panic, filled their helmet radios. It was the first officer. "Captain Kim, the Concorde fleet, they're moving. They've detected your shuttle's energy signature on the surface. They are demanding your immediate surrender and return. They say the planet is reacting to your presence. They are powering weapons. They think you're activating something." They looked up, as if they could see through the white ceiling to the warships in orbit. The peaceful offer was still hanging in the air. But now, the other choice, remaining separate, came with a new, immediate price. The danger was not theoretical anymore. It was here, and it was armed. The calm feeling in the room sharpened, like a mind focusing on a new problem. The Gestalt had perceived the threat in orbit. The offer still stood. But the situation had changed. Daehyun knew they had to answer. Not just the Gestalt. They had to answer the Concorde. And they had to decide right now what being human meant. Was it becoming part of a perfect, safe mind? Or was it staying in their fragile, mortal bodies and facing the storm outside? The gentle feeling in the room vanished. It was replaced by something else. A sense of vast attention, like a mountain turning to look at a fly. The Gestalt was now fully aware of the threat in orbit. The offer of unity still hung in the air, but it was now colored with a new urgency. Joining would be safe. Staying separate meant being caught between two immense powers. Daehyun looked at his crew. Hanul's face was pale, his mind racing through calculations of firepower and shield densities. Myri looked back at the entrance, as if measuring the distance to the shuttle. June and Sumin stood ready, waiting for his order. "We do not accept," Daehyun said aloud, his voice firm in the quiet room. He was not just speaking to his team. He was speaking to the planet. "We cannot give up what we are. Not even for safety. Not even to go home." He felt a ripple in the air, a feeling of curiosity, maybe disappointment, but also a hint of understanding. "We must answer the Concorde," Hanul said. "If we do not, they will assume the worst and open fire. On the planet. On the Zhong." Daehyun put his helmet back on and activated the comms link. "Zhong, this is Kim. We read you. We are safe. Tell the Concorde we have discovered the truth. The planet is not a weapon. It is our people. It is the result of a survival event. There is no threat." The first officer's voice came back, strained. "Sir, Counselor Tal is on the channel for you." Directly, a new voice filled their helmets. It was Tal, but the polite distance was gone. It was cold and hard. "Captain Kim, you have violated a direct containment order. You are interacting with the anomaly. Your actions are provocative. You will return to your ship immediately, or you will be considered hostile." "Counselor Tal," Daehyun said, standing straight in the White Room. "This is no anomaly. This is Earth. The people who lived here faced extinction. They folded space to survive. They merged their consciousness to maintain it. They are not a danger. They are a testament." There was a pause. When Tal spoke again, the fear underneath was clear. A consciousness that can fold spacetime is a consciousness that can unfold it. A unified mind of that scale is inherently unstable. It is an ontological risk. The Concorde cannot allow an unregulated psychic mass of such magnitude to exist freely. It must be studied, contained. "You want to dissect my ancestors," Myri said, her voice hot with anger. "To see how they work." "It is for the stability of the galaxy," Tal replied, as if stating a simple fact. "Your sentimental attachment is irrelevant. You have 1 hour to depart the surface and return to your vessel. Then, the The Concord Defense Fleet will begin procedures to establish a damping field around the planetary body. A damping field, a cage of energy to cut the gestalt off from the universe, to study it like a bug in a jar. The connection cut. The 5 humans stood in silence. The gestalt's presence surrounded them, listening. It understood the ultimatum. Daehyun could feel its calculation, could defend itself. The power to fold space was a power that could be used in other ways, could win a war. But conflict was waste. Violence was a relic of the biology it had left behind. Hanul slammed a fist against his leg. They're afraid, so they want to lock it away. They don't see people. They see a problem. Daehyun turned away from them, looking at the blank wall. He was not a warrior. He was a historian, a keeper of stories. He thought of the book in his cabin. He thought of the laugh of the child. He thought of the struggle and joy of the voyage. That was humanity, not just perfect survival. It was the messy, beautiful, painful act of living as oneself, among other selves. An idea began to form. A wild, desperate idea. He spoke to the air, to the mind in the walls. You showed them you could save yourselves. You showed them your power. That is all they see. They don't understand the why. They never saw the fear, the love, the sacrifice that came before the power. He felt the gestalt's focus sharpen on him. You have all our history, Daehyun continued, his voice growing stronger. Not just the data, the feeling, the cost, the child's laugh, the soldier's fear, the scientist's hope. You are that library. Don't show them your strength. They will only meet it with theirs. What else can we do? Myri asked. Desperate. Daehyun looked at her, then at Hanul. We show them our story, not as a weapon, as a gift. You said the walls are a quantum archive. The data is in the atoms. Can you send it? Not a signal they can block. Can you make the universe itself tell our story? Hanul's eyes went wide. He understood. A broadcast through subspace, using the planet's own spatial field as a carrier wave. Not words, the raw experience, the truth of the choice they made. You can't fight that. You can only witness it. The feeling in the room changed. The gestalt was not just listening now. It was considering. It saw the path Daehyun described. Not defense, not attack. Revelation.it would be the opposite of everything the Concord knew. They used precision, control, containment. This would be an open flood of truth, emotion, and memory. It would be chaos to their order. But it would not break a single ship. A new understanding flowed into them. From the gestalt. It was an agreement, and a request. It would share the story. The whole story. From the first fear to the final, sorrowful unity. But it needed a focus, a translator, a bridge between its vast, unified experience and the individual minds of the galaxy. It needed a human mind to guide the narrative, to point to the child's laugh and say, This is what we saved. Daehyun knew immediately. He was the keeper of the records. He was the one who held the book. He stepped forward. I will do it, he said. Hanul grabbed his arm. Sir, linking your mind directly, we don't know what it will do to you. Daehyun gave a sad, small smile. I have carried this story my whole life. Now I can give it back. He looked at the silvery disc, still on the pedestal. Tell the Jong to record everything. And be ready to run if this goes wrong. He placed both hands on the disc. He closed his eyes. He did not think of physics or diplomacy. He thought of home. Not the geometric perfection around him, but the messy, vibrant, living world of the stories. The smell of rain, the taste of shared food, the sound of a familiar song. The gestalt reached out. It did not absorb him. It connected. Daehyun's body went rigid. His mind was no longer in the white room. It was a single point of light, a storyteller at the heart of a storm of memory. He felt the gestalt align its immense power. Not to fold space, to ripple it. On the surface, Hanul and the others saw nothing. But in orbit, and on every ship, and on every planet within 100 light-years, every screen, every sensor, every communication device suddenly showed one thing. not an image, a direct experience. The last day of old Earth began to play not as a movie, but as a shared dream for the entire galaxy. On the bridge of the Zhong, the crew watched their screens in confusion. The image of the Concorde warships flickered and vanished. In its place, a feeling washed over them. It was not sight or sound fed through the speakers. It was memory, planted directly in the mind. They felt the heat of a sun on skin that was not theirs. They heard the chaotic, beautiful noise of a city. Honking cars, distant music, laughter. They saw the faces of strangers, each one vivid with individual worry and hope. It was Earth not as data, but as lived experience. The shared dream had begun. On the flagship of the Concorde fleet, Counselor Tal staggered. Alarms blared, but they were meaningless. The ship's systems were not under attack. They were receiving. Every being on board was suddenly, helplessly witnessing the final days of a primitive world. Tal saw the frantic scientists, not as historical figures, but as desperate people working through the night, crying over equations, embracing their families for what they thought was the last time. Tal felt their fear, their determination, their terrible love for their fragile world. It was overwhelming on the surface. In the White Room, Hanul and Myri held Daehyun upright. His eyes were open but unseeing, fixed on something far away. A soft light glowed from the disk under his hands, connecting him to the planet mind. He was not being consumed. He was guiding. They could see his lips moving slightly, whispering the narrative of his people. The shared dream continued. It showed the moment of choice, not a cold, logical decision, but a heartbreaking vote. Billions of individual choices to give up their single selves, to become something else, so that the memory of their world, the taste of bread, the color of a sunset, the sound of a specific voice, would not be erased from the universe. The Gestalt did not show itself as power. It showed itself as sacrifice and the dream. A single moment shone brighter than the rest. It was Daehyun's contribution, his anchor point. A small backyard on a late afternoon. A child being pushed on a swing by her father. Her laugh, pure and loud, ringing out. It was not important to history. It was important because it was loved. The dream made every being in range feel why that laugh was worth saving, worth sacrificing everything for. The effect on the Concorde fleet was instant and total. Their weapons systems remained powered, but no order to fire came. How do you shoot at a memory? How do you cage a sacrifice? The soldiers and pilots and commanders were overcome. They were not facing a weapon. They were attending a funeral for a world, and also its rebirth. The dream reached its peak. The merge, the folding, the long quiet wait in the hidden place, and then, gently, it faded. The last feeling it left was not triumph, but a quiet, hopeful sadness, and an open question. The screens on the Zhong and the Concorde ships returned to normal. The silence that followed was thick and fragile. On the flagship, Counselor Tal slowly straightened. The alien's gray face was altered. Something like sorrow, or perhaps understanding, had softened its eyes. It looked at the peaceful, geometric Earth below, and no longer saw an anomaly. It saw a monument. It opened a channel, its voice quiet. Captain Kim of the Zhong, do you read? In the White Room, the light from the disk faded. Daehyun's knees buckled. Hanul and Myri caught him, lowering him to the floor. He was breathing hard, drenched in sweat, but his eyes were clear. He looked exhausted, but whole. We read you, Counselor, Hanul answered, his own voice shaking. The broadcast has been received. Tal paused. A long, hesitant silence. The Concorde withdraws its ultimatum. We will not impose a damping field. Such an act would be a desecration. The relief was so intense it felt like pain. Myri let out a choked sob. However, Tal continued, the diplomat returning to its voice, the existence of this consciousness presents a profound challenge to galactic order. It cannot be ignored. Daehyun, leaning against Myri, spoke softly into his calm. What do you propose? Another pause. Observation. Only. An exchange. The story you shared is a new form of data. we would request permission to study it. Not the mind itself, the story it holds. Tal's voice changed, becoming almost humble. We have no records like it. We have history. We do not have heart. On the view screen in the White Room, they saw the Concord warships begin to move. But not closer. They were turning, repositioning themselves into a wider, respectful circle around the planet. A cordon of observation, not containment. The Gestalt's presence in the room returned, warm and approving. A new understanding flowed into them, simple and clear. It would not hide. It would not expand. It would be a library, a garden, a quiet place in the galaxy. And it offered a gift to its children who had returned with their bodies and their messy hearts. Outside, on the white plain, the ground near the shuttle shimmered. A section of the perfect material flowed like liquid, then solidified into a new shape. It was a simple, elegant platform. On it rested 10 small, smooth stones. They hummed with a soft, internal light. Hanul went out and retrieved one. His scanner chirped. It's a data core, but also an energy source. Plans for technology, not weapons. Environmental systems, terraforming. It shows how to heal dead worlds, to make them live. The message was clear. The Gestalt would tend the memory of the past. The biological humans would tend the future. They would not live on this earth. They would carry its gift to the stars. Weeks later, the Zhong prepared for departure. The ship felt different. The grief was still there, but it had been joined by purpose. They were not refugees anymore. They were ambassadors of a new story. Daehyun stood on the bridge, looking at the planet below. It was still a geometric jewel, but he no longer saw it as alien. He saw it as a library with his favorite book inside. Hanul input the coordinates for a world on the galactic rim, a planet the Concord had listed as barren. They had the tools to make it bloom. Myri stood beside Daehyun. Do you think they are happy? In there. Daehyun thought of the child's laugh, forever part of the calm, vast mind of Earth. They are at peace, he said. And now so are we. The Zhong's engines fired, not with the desperation of exile, but with the steady thrust of a new beginning. They turned away from the silent, watching Earth, and moved towards the waiting stars. Behind them, the planet did not change. It simply was a quiet reminder in the dark that to be human was to have a choice, and that sometimes the strongest thing to do was not to fight, but to remember and to tell the story.